sessions I would do were, there was one I did for this 2K games, and I had no idea who the voiceover was going to be. All I knew was that I had to sign this NDA that was 10 pages long. And I was like, that's weird. And then it ended up being Ice Cube. And I was like, This is why, I take on these jobs, because it's like you never know who's going to be walking through the door.
Yeah, it's so exciting.
It is. It really is, yeah.
I was going to ask you about mastering a little bit more in terms of, you kind of decided to niche into mastering, and obviously you like the idea of like having a shorter transaction and you get to work on a ton of different genres. But is there something about like the process of mastering itself that you find like amazing?
Totally. And the working with artists in a shorter amount of time, that was sort of like, that's like an afterthought of it all.
Yeah, of course.
It's like added bonus.
No, sorry if I phrased it badly.
Yeah, no. It was probably me who phrased it badly, actually. But
no, you didn't. You're good.
Okay. So what? Yeah, I mean, I'd love that there's so many small things you can do in mastering that can make such a difference in the tone and the feel of a record, and that completely fascinates me. Where you can run something through the API that has very specific op amps in them, or you can run it through a manly piece of gear like the Very Mew or the Massive Passive, and they're filled with tubes and transformers, and they have a different sound. And you can run it through a piece of gear just through the box and not do any cut or boost on the EQ or any compression on the compression chain, and you'll still get a sound out of that box. And that totally fascinates me. And it's just those small moves you can make on a record that can make such a difference and go so far. It is one of those things. It's like, in mixing, you make all these like big changes and, big moves, and it's obvious. In mastering, it's so subtle. And a lot of the times bands will listen back to their record and they'll like it a lot better, but they won't necessarily know why. And that's what I love about it. Like where it's not that it's a mystery, because it's not a mystery. I'll tell them full well what I did and then they won't believe me. But,
Yeah. That is so cool. Would you say that, like, as a mastering engineer, you're like a bit of a chameleon and you kind of adapt to every song a little differently? Or do you think, underneath all of it, there's some sort of voice there that people kind of walk away with, like a trademark sound? I don't want to use a trademark sound, but like, there's something in there that is like you in the tone.
That's a really good question. I know when I produced, people would come to me for, my drum sounds. But, I don't know. I really don't know. I imagine people come back to me for, my precision, probably, my attention to detail. But I don't know that there's necessarily a sound involved with it. I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah, okay.
Because it's
not
not
have to know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm using a lot of the gear that a lot of other mastering engineers use. Other than that one, I have one ITI EQ that probably no one else has. I'm like using pretty, I don't want to say generic gear, but stuff that almost every other mastering engineer has had at one point or another. So, yeah, that would be a good question to ask the artists I've worked with. I'd love to know.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to find out down the line.
Yeah.
It's a follow-up question for a later day.
Yes. When you've talked with other mastering engineers, did they feel like they had a sound?
I don't know if I've asked this to other mastering engineers.
Okay. Yeah.
I would say that some mastering engineers, would say they do, and some would say they don't. And I think it, I don't know if you've listened at all to the Attack and Release show with Sam Moses and Matt Garber. I feel like they would tell you the two opposite ends of that spectrum.
You were saying each one of them would have a different opinion on it? Yeah.
I think Sam says he has a sound, and I think Matt says he's trying to, just be a chameleon and work with maybe I'm putting words in their mouth that isn't true, but I think that's what they would say.
Yeah.
Based on what I've heard from them.
My methodology is definitely trying not to get in the way of the music. I don't want to, I almost don't want to leave a sonic footprint. It's like I want to leave it as is. Like if I have to do nothing to the song, like that's like the best thing ever. Like, and then I'm just there for quality control, which is sort of historically what the mastering engineer was there for.
Right. Absolutely. Do you use a dedicated mastering DAW?
I use Wavelab, yeah. So it's pretty much designed from the ground up for mastering.
Nice. So you're You have it all systemed out.
Oh, workflow is nuts. There's a guy, Justin Perkins. He's in, I think, Milwaukee. Have you heard of him?
I have heard of him. I think from Matt Boudreau on the Working Class Audio.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So he's super vocal and out there doing things, especially with Steinberg and Wavelab. And he does these overviews and workflow tutorials on YouTube. And Wavelab isn't the type of program that you can just kind of jump into. Like if you're a Pro Tools person and you get Logic, there's definitely a learning curve with it, but it's like a day or two to sort of figure out the syntax. At the end of the day, both Logic and Wavelab are pretty much the same thing. But Wavelab is, did I say Logic and Pro Tools? Wavelab it's just another beast. And I actually tried out Wavelab years ago, like 5-6 years ago, probably when it was in version 6. And I just didn't have the time to learn it while I was doing, so many other things, and I never did. But I don't know, I was using Logic before for my mastering, and there just comes a point where you sort of outgrow a standard DAW for doing what you're doing. And I had to find another piece of software, and I looked around for a while, and sadly, I went with a piece of software that didn't have a lot of great documentation at the time. So the learning curve was pretty steep. And, I remember, using Logic and pumping out these masters at the same time where I'm sort of in the back learning how Wavelab functions as a piece of software. And now looking back, it's, I feel like I wasted so much time working on masters, not in a dedicated mastering DAW. But, what are you going to do?
What does Wavelab give you that Logic doesn't give you?
A lot of the metering tools in it are just so precise and really well put together. The sequencing is so much. It's set up more for what you would be doing in a mastering scenario where you have your mixes and you're going to run it out to your outboard gear and then run it back in, and just how everything just functions is set up for mastering. Putting in IRC codes. ISRC codes and, metadata and all that stuff that, regular DAWs just don't handle.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't have to go out to like Hoffa DDP or any of that other stuff. It's all in there. Look at me dropping my fake mastering knowledge.
I actually do. I love the Hoffa DDP maker. I use that actually for just because you can send out the DDP like in a zip to a client, and it just like they hear it as it, should be heard in sequence, and it looks cool, and it's just an easy package to send over. So I will make the DDP for a client if they're doing a CD, which is rare, but oftentimes I'll do that for a client mastering a vinyl record for, so they can hear how the sides sound in sequence.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's an amazing tool, that DDP player.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I know mastering engineers work with a lot of clients, and you have like a ton of, artists coming to you at once. I guess having your wife, is she staying on top of all that organization, or do you have other systems in place to stay on top of everything?
Are you talking about like just the semantics of like when an email comes in, what happens?
Yeah, or just, how do you keep track of all the projects? Because there's so many. It's not the same as, like, for me, it's like I don't have that many projects, right? I could put it on a Kanban and pretty much, keep track of stuff, right?
Totally. So yes, absolutely. There's a ton of tools I use. So I do a color coding system in my emails based on, is this the Dropbox or the WeTransfer link for the song that I should be downloading? Do I need to respond to this email? Have I responded to this email? And then I use iCal for a lot of my scheduling of when I'm going to be doing things, so it can be relatively orderly and, sort of first come, first serve. Oh, and another thing that I use for amazing organization is this software called Session Recall. Are you familiar with that?
I've heard of it, yeah.
So
I don't know much about it, but I've heard of it, yeah.
It's amazing. So prior to using this piece of software, I would either take pictures or like write in a notebook the settings on all my pieces of gear, and it was time consuming. Especially when you had revisions and, had to change something. So there's this piece of software called Session Recall, and literally it's like sort of recall sheets for every piece of gear you own, and then you can sort of turn the ones on that you're using for a particular mastering session, and you can move the knobs to where they are set on your analog gear.
Nice.
And then you can have instant recall. So if I have to do a recall for a song that I worked on the week before, I can pull up this piece of software, pull up the album, pull up the song, and boom, that's my settings that I used for the analog print. And it's right there.
So it's just like a desktop app, basically. On your
Exactly.
computer.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like you're looking at a plugin per se, but it's not actually a plugin. It's just like, a recall sheet for the piece of gear.
That's
amazing,
really smart.
Immensely helpful, and a gigantic time saver.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, back when you did have this recording studio, did you have a philosophy about, working with bands and, how to make records?
Yeah, it's about the performance. I think for a lot of what I try and do is, at least when I was doing this, was more about getting a really good take. And I'm not like a huge, let's punch in here and let's edit this and comp that. I mean, I end up doing that a lot of the times, but if I can get a full take of something, like that's what I'm aiming for.
Any favorite capturing techniques?
Yeah, I mean, for the guitars, I use the Bayer Dynamic M160, which really has its claim to fame with being the two microphones they used on Zeppelin's When the Levee Breaks. But I used them on guitars, and it's one of those desert island microphones. I love this microphone, and Sean Mercer turned me on to that microphone.
Is it a dynamic mic or a ribbon mic?
It's a ribbon microphone, and it's I think it's hypercardioid too. Like I think it's like, or maybe it's just not a wide cardioid. It's a pretty narrow cardioid. But
cool.
It's just one of those mics that you could just use it on everything. We've used it on overheads, vocals, obviously guitars. It's one of those, like the Sennheiser 441 is one of my desert island microphones. I love that microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something about ribbon mics that people seem to love. I really got to get hip to it. I just don't have enough of an opportunity at this point. Like, I'm not really tracking drummers anymore,
Yeah.
I got to get hip to the ribbon mic at some point.
Yeah, I mean, AEA makes the R84, and it's not too expensive, but it's also a good vocal mic.
Yeah. And people love those Royers on guitars.
The Royers. Yeah, I've at the studio, they had a pair of the Royers. I've never been a huge fan of the Royers. I don't know. Yeah, I know they pair well with a 57, but I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. To each their own.
So the Bayer Dynamic on the guitars.
Oh yeah, I love weird mics too. Like it's just such, it also kind of looks weird. It's like it's sort of a vocal mic, but it's like a little smaller. Yeah, it's for a small mic. It has such a big sound too.
Right. Yeah. What's your favorite vocal mic?
Oh, I mean, it just totally depends. I love the AKG C12. I know everybody's kind of hot and cold with the U87, but I'm a big fan of the U87. I love the Sennheiser 441, although I don't often use that for vocals, but I have, and it's worked really well.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of those on vocalists. I see a lot of them on horns and toms.
Exactly.
Mostly.
Yeah, I used to use it on snare a lot.
Cool.
Yeah, it's directional.
Yeah, I actually love the RE20 on snare drums. Like it's like,
oh wow,
I love the RE20 on everything. It's
a great microphone.
It's such a versatile mic.
I'm that way with the SM7.
You're not an SM7 fan.
No, I am. I because I don't have an RE20, I have an SM7. I'm sure if I had an RE20, I would use it on everything all the time.
I feel like something's, it's all about what you like.
Right.
Because I've been helping, a couple guys do a podcast recently, and we did I brought my RE20 and an RE320 to their studio and compared it with their SM7 to see what they liked better. And for me, it was obvious that the RE20 was the best one. And for them, it was the SM7 sounds the best. I was like, maybe it's just me. I don't really like the SM7 that much, and I really like the RE20. But most people seem to like the SM7 better. So it's probably just the way I hear sound. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And everyone kind of has a different pattern or puzzle piece to fit that. And I feel like, I don't know. There's definitely been studios I've worked out of that had the RE20, and I feel like I could go to either microphone and the SM7 would work every time on whatever I was recording, but I felt like the RE20 wouldn't always work every time. and maybe that's why I went down that path. But that said, there are limitations with